I've been thinking a lot lately about how there really are no support groups for people who deal with suicidality or who have attempted, there's support groups for people who are survivors in the sense that they had a friend or a family member commit suicide. But there's not a lot of people that you can talk to who are going through it with you at the same time.
Hey there, my name is Sean, and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, millions of people try to take their own lives, and we almost never talk about it. And when we do talk about it, many of us, including me, are not very good at it. So one of my goals with this podcast is to have more conversations and hopefully better conversations with attempt survivors. I am going to keep trying. I want to thank everybody who has joined me on this podcast to share so openly and courageously in the past year and a half. Thank you so much. And to all of our listeners from around the world, thank you. If you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to share your story, I would love to talk. Please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com or on Facebook or Twitter @suicidenoted. And we are talking about suicide on this podcast, so please take that into account before you listen. But I do hope you listen because there is so much to learn. And if I could ask a favor, and I do ask this favor a lot, let people know about this podcast by mouth on social media. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, rating and reviewing really helps. And I do think there are people that need to hear this podcast. So if you would, take a few moments, maybe right now, and give Suicide Noted even more love. I really appreciate it. Today, I am talking with Alex. Alex lives in Illinois, and he is a suicide attempt survivor. Hey, Alex, how are you?
How are you?
How am I? I'm okay, I don't know, how do you answer that question, really? Yeah, I'm all right, What do you want me to say?
You just say things are good, right? Isn't that that's the easiest
Things are
way,
fine,
right?
Alex. Things are fine.
Everything's great.
Offer me a platitude or two, we can move forward.
That's right.
Alex, where are you, by the way?
Illinois, Chicago.
First of all, thank you for doing this, because most people don't, and I don't judge them for that, but I do really appreciate people who have insert whatever word, courage or grit or whatever to do this. What compelled you to reach out?
I think it's helpful to talk about it. Really, I think I did it for selfish reasons more than anything else, which is just that I wanted the release of being able to get your story out there. It feels strange to do because it's a very public way, and there's certainly a lot of other people I could talk to about it. But I think it's nice to be heard from people who kind of understand. And I mean, I know, having listened to this podcast, that you get it. And I know that the listeners will get it. I mean, I talk to therapists, I talk to family and friends to some degree, but I know no one who's really dealt with suicidality. And I think that there is just something that's a relief about getting to say it to people who will understand you.
Yeah, 100%. When you say get it, what's the it? I know it's a tough one, but what's the it?
You talk to people and the question is just always I've gone through hard things before, but I just can't imagine doing that. I can't imagine wanting to die, that's, maybe a fleeting thought, I wish this was over, but to actually go through with it, or to actually make plans, to even go that far with you, or, to go that far with it is just, I think, out of a lot of people's comprehension. And so I found, when talking to people, sometimes you have to explain yourself a lot, and sometimes you just want to get your story out there and not have to, get into a philosophical conversation about death or why would you? Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's really the main reason. I would like to, be able to share my story with people who I think would understand it, and to the degree that I can be helpful. I think it's nice to not have to be alone in this situation too. And so I've certainly benefited from listening to the podcast. I want to contribute as much as possible to other people who will benefit from hearing these stories too. It's just nice to be able to hear other people say things that have gone through your head and that feel like you're the only person in the world who's had this go through your head before.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Before we get into your actual attempt, question for you, and there's a little irony here. I'm going to get philosophical based on what you said about people being philosophical. Why do you think, and we're just spitballing here, why do you think so many people, I think it's safe to say, certainly the majority of the people have such a difficult time conversing? Is that the right word? Talking about this stuff. Why is it that they philosophize or pontificate or offer platitudes or the myriad other things they tend to do, even if they're well intentioned? Why?
I think most people find death to be very scary. I think the idea for most people who haven't hit that stage, that could be something that's something that scary to people personally, is something that someone would choose for themselves, is just really frightening, and people don't want to go into a space that makes them feel frightened. I I wish I knew why. It's unfortunate that people can't go into that space, because it is helpful for anyone who's been there to be able to just talk. The fact that most people shy away from it is it's frustrating for us that we can't say more about it. But I would guess that that's the main reason, is that people are already personally afraid of death, and so it's scary to have to confront someone who would choose that.
And you chose that at least once, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I can get into some more of my stories.
Yeah.
So I've never hit the point that I have ever needed to be like resuscitated or anything like that. But I would describe it as basically I've stared down the barrel of a gun a few times. I don't own a gun, so all my attempts were the same, and that was that I used a belt and a doorknob and tried to hang myself. Would get to the point of sort of feeling lightheaded, approaching unconsciousness, and then would sort of walk back from the ledge. All these, in that sort of situation, all you really have to do is just stand up and get up and walk out. But yeah, I think in all those situations, I really kind of went into it thinking this is the night that we're going to do it. And then, or at the very least, being ambivalent about it and saying, I know how this might go, and I've accepted that. But I hit a point where it really became a sort of a habit. I mean, I've done it upwards of 20 times. I don't know exactly, but it also, I got some sort of release, I guess, in the same way that people who self-harm get released from that too, where just being able to sort of viscerally stare death in the face and remind myself I do have some sort of control in the situation, even if it's a morbid way to sort of regain control, was helpful. Made me feel like I had some sort of power back in my life when I felt like things were spinning out of control.
How old were you, if you can recall, more or less the first time?
First time I did it, I was 16. It was just the one time. It was very frightening the first time I did it. And because I was so young, I definitely remember thinking, you're 16, you have a lot of life ahead of you. Maybe there's stuff ahead of you, and so some of the more recent times, I didn't always feel that way. I always felt like you can do it tomorrow, you can do it next week, this just doesn't have to be tonight. But that one really shook me, and I felt like I needed to try to change things and see what my life had in store. And so I went through a really long period where I didn't try again. And then it didn't start again until about a year ago. And so I'm 28 now. So, a period over a decade passed between those attempts. And then in the last year, there've been probably about 20, I would guess, total.
So 16 to 26, 27, right? Life happens. And so does something change that compels you to go back and do that second time? And then obviously the times after that, what changes?
The pandemic, I think, contributed. I think the isolation was maybe part of it. The big thing was really, I feel like life from 16 to like 27 was, more or less a continuous uphill climb. I went to college, got a job, things were going well, got into grad school. I'm in a pretty good grad school program right now. And then hit a point where, transition from doing classwork to having to do research was just, I didn't feel like I could do it anymore. Spent every night, couldn't sleep anymore. Felt like this is not the right fit for me, and had spent so much of my life climbing to this particular point. Didn't really know what was left. Felt kind of totally lost. Like, okay, well, what do I do now? This isn't the right fit for me. I don't know where to go. I applied for jobs. I'm still struggling to land a job. It just felt like I had made all this progress, and I just felt like I was sort of falling off the ladder that I'd spent so much time climbing. And I guess I couldn't see, and still struggle to see what's next to some extent. Just as an aside, I said at the beginning that I'm doing it for personal reasons. I do hope that this will be helpful, but in some ways I am a little guilty that I can't give people a story of like, oh, I got through it and you could too. I mean, every day's still a struggle, and it is for a lot of people who are on the podcast. So I still hope it'll be helpful.
for what it's worth, and I welcome everybody's stories and wherever they are, I actually prefer in some ways that I can't quite quantify the people who don't have it figured out, who are still struggling, who tell me when I ask them the likelihood of them trying again, they're like, I might try again. Not because I want them to, but I just think that those are the conversations we hear even less. We'll hear the ones where things are okay now. I even wrote a book. Great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I want the ones where it's like, no, this is hard. I'm not making you any fucking guarantees. I'm going to try the best I can, and it may not work, and it might. So don't shy away in as much as you're comfortable. I think people need to hear that for what it's worth. Yeah, really.
It kind of reminds me too, because again, I've been thinking a lot lately about how there really are no support groups for people who deal with suicidality or who have attempted. You've talked about this in the podcast before. There's support groups for people who are survivors in the sense that they had a friend or a family member commit suicide.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of people that you can talk to who are going through it with you at the same time. And I know I was thinking about, like, imagine going to AA and the only people you heard from are people who were alcoholics 25 years ago. I mean, it's just such a frustrating position to be in, that you feel like you're missing some honesty when you are, I mean, I get, we don't want to encourage people to do it. And so people are a little worried about having someone who's like, yeah, I might still struggle. I might still do it one day. It's not a message people want to hear, but it is, people are struggling with it. And I think those people deserve to be able to say it and to be heard.
100%. How many people know that you have attempted at least once? How many people in the world know that?
My parents, and I would say about 5 or 6 friends.
Okay. How did they respond when they learned of this? Because that's not like I didn't do well on my my exam type news.
Right. So the only person I personally told was my girlfriend, now fiance. And so that was really what spurred this whole thing. I mean, again, all of these were things I had been secretly doing. I was never found. I always sort of made the decision on my own that, all right, we're going to go another day. And it finally hit the point. I mean, I just had such overwhelming guilt about it. It was very, very hard. I remember just sitting in silence with her for probably 5 minutes. Well, it felt like 5 minutes to just get the words out. But I told her. She was shocked. I think that's the first thing. Luckily, she does. I mean, I don't know if this is too much personal information, but she's a PhD psychology student. So she didn't know what to do. I think better than most people. I'm incredibly lucky. I mean, I feel like I'm the most lucky person just in terms of who I'm with, that I don't think it could have been handled better. She took me to the hospital immediately, which I didn't love and still didn't love, but it did lead to some good treatment outcomes, I think, longer term. Not always the case. Yeah. But they set me up with a partial hospitalization program that I think was really, really helpful. That at least made me, the reason I didn't find the hospital helpful is, one of the things that really leads to my suicidality is just feeling a lack of control. And so throwing me in sort of a padded room and being like, all right, we're going to tell you when you can go to bed and when you can eat, and we'll check in on you every 15 minutes was not just the best feeling. I mean, it really sort of intensified some of those feelings. But getting out, they set me up with a partial hospitalization program that, there's no one forcing me to go every day. It really felt like I could sort of take ownership and say, I do want to get better. I'm going to go because I want to feel better. I don't want to have to feel miserable every day. So I think that helped a lot. As far as, and I got a little off the story, but as far as everybody else, all of the other people were told by my partner when I was in the hospital. One of them with my permission, because he was a close friend. We stay in contact. I knew it had been maybe 5 days, and he's probably wondering why I haven't responded to his messages. And so I said, you should probably let him know that that I'm in the hospital, and you can let him know the whole reason I'm here. He's a good friend, so he deserves to know. But outside of her, I've really not discussed the suicide attempts with anybody else. They've asked sort of vague questions about how's the depression going, but it's still, and even with people who are pretty comfortable. I mean, I have friends. One of the friends that knows is a clinical psychologist in training, and and she hasn't asked me a lot about it either. I mean, I think it's just still a topic people are uncomfortable about. They don't want to make you uncomfortable, so people still don't really want to talk about it. And my parents have never talked to me about it either after all this time. So they were also told by her after the hospitalization.
And I don't have kids, so I'm not going to presume I would know how I would engage with my child that went through something like that. Sort of a unique relationship, but it's hard for me, Alex, to understand when you learn of this. Like, if you told them almost anything else, Like I got into grad school, I got into a PhD program, I met this great girl. I even just like I had this amazing meal at this restaurant. People would say like, "Oh, really? Like tell me more." But not with this. This is just like I just don't understand. And this is not pointing a finger at anybody in your life. Really, it's not. But I don't quite get like why just not talking about it is an option. Like even if it were just, what if it was just like, hey, I have no idea what to say. I'm not even sure I want to hear it. But clearly we got to like, let's engage in some way. And we don't really do that. And I have no doubt that your friends and parents are good people. Help me understand.
If I knew, maybe I could help improve the conversation. I don't know. I mean, some of it is they don't do it because they don't want to say the wrong thing, right? People are afraid. Especially someone who's in a vulnerable position, they don't want to say something that makes me upset.
Just for you, what might be the wrong thing that someone would be worried about saying? Like, is there a lot that they should be concerned about if they were entering into it? They really wanted to understand Alex or just talk about it. Are there things that they could say? It's a bit of a loaded question. Because I don't think there's that much people could say that's that wrong as long as you give a shit and you just want to hear someone out. There's probably some things that aren't great to hear, sure. Because there might be people here who hear this and they are in a position of like your friends or your parents, where they have a son or a boyfriend or whomever who's really struggling. I don't know. Is there that? I don't know. I'm caught here, man. I'm just sort of spitballing here with you. It just throws me off.
I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think you are hitting the nail on the head that maybe the wrong thing to say is nothing. That is the wrong thing to do. Because
Right.
it is just so much better to know that someone cares. Telling someone, I really wish that I really hope that you're still around. I really hope that whatever's troubling you, that I want to hear about it. And I did get a lot of texts after I got out about like, if there's anything troubling you, you can always come to me, which is nice to hear. But I think there is a difference between that and come to me now, like what's troubling, like talk, just talk, tell me what's going on, because I still feel like I'm in that position where, I don't know, people, it's easier to say I will be there than to be there. Right. And so I still don't feel like I'm comfortable going out of that shell. And so maybe people coming to you and just sharing your experience. Here's the time that I had a hard time. Tell me about yours,
sort of equating my own shitty experience, whether I tried to end my life or not. But if I say to you, and I want people to hear this, Alex, I have no idea. I can't imagine what that's like. I can't. But I went through this thing and it was so fucking hard. And just leave it at that. Like there doesn't have to be and you're going to get through it too. I mean, you could add that, but just knowing that in that moment, somebody else in my life went through something really hard and we can be okay in each other's company with that.
Right. The other thing too is that if people are afraid of saying the thing there's nothing you could say that's going to be the thing that convinces me to do it. I'm already in the dark spot, you're not going to make it worse. Maybe you won't say the most helpful thing. You're not going to say the thing that pulls me out of it. That's not on you. You don't have to say the thing that saves my life. Like there's not going to be one word that you're going to say. Right. You just being there and listening and talking is the thing that's going to help, or, it can't hurt.
Trust everybody who's ever been through this. If there was a magic word that could help, we'd fucking know it and we'd say it. There's no one magic word, y'all. So I want to just loop back. You had said your fiance handled it really well. I'm paraphrasing. Yeah. Because we're talking about, and we're going sort of deep into these like moments in which you engage with someone. And in that moment, when you really told her something that sounded very difficult, very challenging, what'd she do or say? Or did she not do or not say? As an example.
She froze. She accepted the moment as it was, thought about how to respond.
Yep.
And she said, you don't have to go through this alone anymore, was the first thing she said. She says, it makes me really sad that you've been on your own this whole time. And I don't want you to have to be on your own. I want to be there with you. And I want to feel all these things that you're feeling. And I want to, be along on your side through this whole thing. And I mean, that was just like, I'm tearing up just like thinking about it, because I don't know. That's just not the response I guess I had told myself that I would get. I guess I was so used to blame, or maybe I was, blaming myself that I expected everyone else to blame me too and say, what the fuck's wrong with you? How could you ever do such a thing? And, there just wasn't a response. It was just so much more empathetic. Yeah. And I think it's just a lovely thing to say. I felt really supported in that moment. I was not happy that we were off to the hospital, but I knew
Right.
that she wanted what was best for me, and that was what we had to do in that moment. So
I like her.
yeah, yeah, she's
I,
great. I picked a good one. Yeah.
how many people in the world do you have to talk to about these kinds of difficult things, whether you pay them or not?
Yeah, I have a counselor that I see. My partner is really, as I've said, really lucky to one to have in a situation like this. I have a very close friend who's a clinical psychologist in training. I think the biggest impediment still is me. I think that these are people who would all be receptive, but I still think that it's still hard for me to talk about. And I know I opened the whole discussion by saying it's very helpful to talk about. So why don't you? And I mean, a lot of it is just still fear of having to go back to the hospital, that kind of stuff. You don't know. I feel like I'm always taking a little bit of risk every time I put something like that out there, that you don't fully know how it's going to come back on you.
Right.
And
Right.
so I still shy away from it a little bit. Whether that's the right strategy, I mean, I don't know. It's the one that I am most comfortable with. And so I sort of avoid it for that reason. But I mean, there are people, one thing I know when I first revealed it to my partner, and we would talk about it after the hospitalization, and she was just like, I don't quite understand, like, why. She's like, why didn't you tell me? I'm here for you. And I was like, because I didn't want you to stop me. Like, I mean, it was like that simple. I made my call, and I don't want to be stopped. And I didn't know how to communicate that I was in a lot of pain while withholding that I was to the point of like being suicidal. And so that was the thing that we wrestled with afterwards, is I was like, I was telling you I was depressed and anxious. You knew it. And she's like, yeah, I knew it. But like, I didn't realize you wanted to kill yourself. That's a whole nother level. Like, people get stressed out. People don't normally want to kill themselves. And that's the thing I needed to know. And so, it's a tough communication problem.
And the words, we have no choice but to communicate with words, but sometimes they are tricky because you say, I'm not feeling well, or I'm stressed, or I'm depressed. And if we don't get beyond that, what does that mean for you in your daily life, every moment? Like, then it can be something that we just say, okay, well, he's going through a tough time and hopefully the meds kick in, or, you know what I mean? I get it. And we're busy, right? We're busy and we're doing our lives and we're working and we're picking up our stupid dry cleaning and whatever. What helps other than, actually, I don't want to presume that talking helps, but what helps?
I do think talking helps. I already feel like this is helping. The podcast has helped. I think reading, I've read just like a number of books really as I've gone through. I mean, I was hospitalized in July. It's now November. So it's been 4 months since I kind of like went from getting no help to sort of going through this whole process of, getting medication, seeing a counselor. Honestly, just like reading testimonials. I've gotten a number of books of people who sort of been through it. I think that helps a lot. Yeah, distraction helps a lot. You don't have to think about suicide all the time. To some degree, we do have control of our thoughts. It's not always easy to exercise. I don't know that I always want to exercise it, but you can try to choose, and it takes a lot of practice. But you can try to choose to think about other things that bring you more comfort. So I think that helps. It's not always available, but I think it helps. Trying to find things to live for when you're sort of deep in that hole, and you find that the things that you thought brought you the most comfort just aren't fucking doing it for you anymore, and just reevaluating everything. Like, what is it? What is it that used to help me get up in the morning? If it's not doing it for me right now, what can? I spent sort of the last 3 years sort of stuck in this graduate school program. And so that was sort of how I spent most of my time. And so it's really caused me to do a lot of reevaluation of like, prior to all this, you weren't always a PhD student. Like, what did you used to love to do? And how can we sort of bring some of that back so that you're not fucking miserable all the time, Those things have helped. It's a challenge.
What's your PhD in, or what was your research in? Or
economics.
All right, so you're not loving it.
Yeah, not loving it. Looking for jobs in something else at the moment. But still on medical leave from school. It's actually been really the best. Actually, the best thing to come out of the hospitalization for sure, that a social worker there was like, you don't have to go back to school. They have a FMLA for a reason, go do a partial hospitalization, give yourself some time. And it's been great. And it gave me time to sort of reevaluate, is this what I should be doing? If you're in a position where you've tried to kill yourself 20 times in the last year, maybe it's time to start thinking about what bigger changes you could make in your life. That was really the conclusion I came to, is it was time to start looking for something else.
Well, I hope you find it, obviously.
I do think the PHP helps. I started TMS just recently. And so we'll see how that goes. But, I mean, I'm definitely in the space where I just want to try whatever I can.
If if you've heard the podcast, you'll probably hear a sort of set of questions I tend to at some point get to. One of them I always ask, or usually, is the myths. So I don't know if you thought about that in advance, or I could just ask you now. I mean, and we've touched on them in just the way we've conversed, but are there any myths that you want to say, like, nope, like this is just not accurate, at least in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can only touch on my own experience. Impulsivity is something that we get a lot, that it's this very impulsive action, which is probably true. But I think it sort of shies away by just how much it's on your mind. And I think that like this is something that people really have to work up to, at least in my experience, like someone who, so, when I was in high school, I went to a really small high school. I had probably 70 people in my graduating class, and 3 of my classmates killed themselves in 1 year. And I remember just thinking at the time, because I had already tried, just like, these guys must have been trying for a long time. I mean, like I had tried, it's a difficult thing to do. I don't know. I'm not sure that that's fully appreciated. Just like how long that is, people are sitting around ideating, how people are practicing, how many times someone before they shoot themselves probably hold a gun to their head. There are a lot of chances to intervene. And I think that, it's why it's not always a bad idea to, even when you don't know, even when you might not think anything's going on in somebody else's life, ask them how they're doing in a deep way, is what's going on in your life, really press. And, you might not, maybe try asking your friends if they've had suicidal thoughts might seem like it's out of the blue, but people might be willing to answer those questions. I didn't go to my girlfriend that night expecting to confess to her that I was having suicidal thoughts. I told her I had self-harmed, and she asked me if I'd had suicidal thoughts, and I didn't want to confess it, but I did in that moment. And so, I think that it's, I only say it just to say that you never know where somebody is, and it might not be a bad idea if you see, small signs in a person, they're just not looking the same. They might be sort of in a dark space, and it might not be a bad idea to just get them to talk.
Yep. But then we have the whole other part of when they do talk.
Yeah.
What?
How do you? Yeah.
How do you? What
how
do
you
I
not say the wrong thing?
How do you not say the wrong thing? And look, and this isn't easy. Some people just seem to have that understanding of how to engage in ways that are mostly warm and welcoming and don't make someone feel worse. And some just don't. That's my experience, right? And I don't know how to get that message to them of how to do it, because I hear a lot, well, just listen. It's like, yeah, people know to do that, but they just fuck it up. So now what? Like, now what? Obviously, that's not enough of information for people to say, okay, just listen. That means this. Alex or Mindy or Meg or Peter says this. And then there's a disconnect. There's just a disconnect. But it's a hell of a good start. But my only concern, not my concern, look, hey, how are you doing? No, really, how are you doing? Have you had any thoughts of ending your life? If somebody shares that with you, that's not an easy thing for most people to talk about. So I just hope people who hear that, like, how do you create a space for someone to feel safe and then return to that space with you in a day or a week or a month? Not a real question there. It's just me thinking aloud. Like, how do you convey that to people?
From my personal experience, I always feared, I had a very sort of vivid idea. And I mean, to some extent, it was proven right in the fact that I definitely thought I was going to get shipped off to a hospital if I ever said, oh yeah, I thought about ending my life or whatever. Yeah. I mean, and I'll say too, I spent a lot of the last, between the attempts. So first of all, I mean, I think I started ideating when I was probably 11 or so. I mean, I was definitely ideating in that whole 12-year gap between the attempts too. And, that probably was that fear of having to go to the hospital was sort of a main reason that you don't want to do it. So, but to the extent that you can make people comfortable and say, just hold on a little bit. Like, well, what other treatments are out there? Like what can we explore? It is hard to know what to say in someone in that situation. What I try to say to myself when I'm in those spots is, that's always on the table. I think there's a lot of people who are really rushing to get it off the table, like, whoa, well, you can't do that. Sign this contract that you won't, that you just won't do it. And then it's all set. And someone who's already there, it's on the table, it's already on the table. It's something they're thinking about. And just saying, look, I hope you'll wait. I hope you will just give it some time. I hope you'll come with me and we'll explore together, like, what is out there. There's, there's pills, there's therapists, the TMS, ECT, the, ketamine. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. let's look at it together and let's see what could work for you.
I love that. I love that the idea of slow down a little bit. If someone's literally at the edge of a building, yes, I get that you'd freak out. By the way, though, for what it's worth, everybody I've ever talked to who was in a position, an emergency support position, like the guy who used to help people talk them off the Golden Gate Bridge, same stuff, slow down. They still slow it down. Slow it down. Yep. The person's not killing themselves right now. They're talking to you. Slow down.
Exactly.
I love that you pointed that out. Like, don't rush through it. Breathe. Most people who go through really hard times don't try to end their lives, right?
Yeah, exactly.
More than we probably think, but not, let's say, most. Do you think it's just something in your composition and your chemical? Is it? Do you, any ideas what might be sort of underlying?
I don't know exactly how it started. I mean, I assume that I am probably harder on myself than most people are, and so when you're in a position where you have sort of low self-worth already, not much feeling of like belongingness to any sort of social structure, that it really only takes sort of small things going awry to sort of tip you over the edge. You know, if you had asked, and I've thought a bit about this too. If you had asked me, you know, again, I went through like a 12-year stretch where I was not trying to kill myself. I had small things in my life going wrong there too. Why did that not spur me to try to kill myself? And I guess if you would have asked me back then too, like, do you regret not killing yourself at 16 or something? I probably would have said, you know, it doesn't matter either way, I guess. I mean, I think I was just already in that headspace of just, I've accepted you're going to die one day. If it's tomorrow, if it's 30 years from now, how did I get in that headspace? You know, that's the stuff that I think is a little harder to know exactly why I'm there. But I mean, it definitely is the explanation for why, you know, people lose their jobs all the time. People make career transitions all the time. It's a thing that doesn't cause most people to kill themselves. I definitely understand that. And I think it's, you know, and so I think that's why it's so confusing for people when you try to say, you know, like, I was struggling in grad school, so I had to kill myself. But it doesn't take much to when you're already kind of there to say, yeah, well, now I don't have any purpose. So, you know, what's the point? I've tried to investigate with a counselor to some extent. Self-hatred's it's a brutal thing to to do to yourself on a daily basis. You'll say shit to yourself you never say to anyone else that no one else would ever say to you. You know, living that way is can cause you down can push you down some tough spirals.
We have like general numbers that we're able to gather. People who have attempted suicide. Sometimes they're murky, right? Because if someone's drinking all day, is it suicide? Is it not suicide?
Sure.
And we can have an idea of how many people complete suicide, how many attempt. I am always more curious, and I don't think you could ever know this. We will never know this. I don't think of like how many people think about it.
Yeah.
I think it's way more than most people would guess. And I'm not saying that because I have a podcast that deals on this subject. I just don't think it's that uncommon.
You know, I saw one recently, I want to say, like high schoolers. You know, I think high school is probably one of like the peak times where people are really, because you're in this like really confined social bubble, you know, your view of sort of like what the world is so small, and like social situations are just tremendously upsetting. I want to say it was something like 30-40%. I might have to dig it out, but yeah, I mean, that would be my guess too. I would guess, you know, like half of people. I mean, not that I know anything, but
yeah.
And then there's questions of like, what is ideating exactly? Right. You know, like I just have a fleeting thought versus like, okay, I want to like cut my throat. I want to jump off a bridge. You know, that kind of stuff is, I don't know. There's levels to it.
Yeah. It's a little different of like contemplating what is life and my existence, existential questions versus, yes, I'm thinking about going to a bridge and jumping. They're different.
Yep.
So I asked this question earlier. You had mentioned that post-hospital has not necessarily been a cakewalk and that you still ideate some. What do you think the next year holds? You don't have to candy coat it. Don't candy coat it.
I mean, I think there's like a severe risk. I'm 28 right now. I think it's 20% chance that I don't make it to 30, I would guess. You know, I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say. I'm in a tough spot right now. And so it kind of feels like, how long can I wait it out? I don't know if this is too weird to say too. I've had a lot of thoughts too about, you know, I'm engaged, gonna get married. You know, we talk to kids. I love kids. I could imagine being a parent. And then I have all these like deep fears of, God, how can someone who has been suicidal for all these years, like bring kids into the world? And like, you know, am I going to fuck these kids up by killing myself at 40? So like, you should do it now before you know, get to that stage. I mean, I don't know. These are the thoughts that I have kind of lived with for a long time. And I don't know. I would say the risk is still pretty high, but I'm doing what I can in the meantime to try some things out.
What the hell else can you do, really? What else can you do? Legitimate, and you don't need to hear this from me, but just as I sort of heard you say that, yeah, those are legitimate concerns to fuck your kids up.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you're having those thoughts because they are legitimate. Oh no, it'll be fine. It'll work. No, it doesn't always work out. It's a good thing to think about. Not everyone should necessarily have a bunch of kids. Does that mean? Maybe that's mean. Maybe that's mean. But I mean, like legitimately, some people, for me, I've got some genetic stuff and I don't know what that might mean for the particular zygote that's fucking formed, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just going to make just from day one. I don't know if I want to be that person who gives that chromosomal disadvantage to my kid. I don't know. It's just, those are fair things to think about, right?
Yep.
I was just thinking, what if Alex's fiance was here?
Oh, I know. God. Well, I mean, as I'll probably tell her at some point that I did this, but I really wanted to give myself some freedom to be more honest. I knew like if she knew about it, she'd listen to it. And I didn't want that to sort of restrain what I was saying. I wanted to sort of give myself the option later, but I think I'll probably tell her.
Yeah. And it sounds like some of the stuff that you've talked about, she knows about, but yes, I understand.
Oh yeah. I don't think I'm telling you anything that I haven't already talked about with her. So
yeah,
whether she's comfortable with me telling the world about it, I don't know, but I think she would be.
What, is there anything else that you wanted to share? Open question. This has been really interesting and informative. I appreciate it.
I like I said before, I wish I could give more in terms of, boy, here's how you could get through it. Which who knows what that magic tool is, but I really am a believer in the just give it time, try some stuff out. There are a lot of options out there. There's no problem that needs to be solved this moment. Figuring out how to take time to breathe is, I think, an essential skill for dealing with suicidality. I think it's helped me a lot. And I'm going to continue to keep working on it. No one's ever out of the woods on this too. The fact that it reoccurred like 12 years later, it does make me think a lot about that. This is probably just something I'll live with. And it's definitely something that if you have someone in your life who has dealt with this, never assume that it's gone. I think once you sort of get into that space, it becomes kind of a way of life at a point. And so it's something to be aware of. It's something to check in with people about how they're doing and in a serious way, not just platitudes.
Fuck platitudes. I should get that domain, fuckplatitudes.com, see what I can do with it. What is one potential industry that looks or sounds interesting as you move away from your economics research and all that other good stuff?
I would guess clean energy probably is like a good one to work in. Definitely growing very quickly. And I wish I had, as I think back, I kind of wish I would have gone into like engineering or something and tried to work in like the clean energy industry. Who knows? I could have had like 10 careers in my mind of things that I could have done, but for certainly very important with climate change. Hopefully it grows faster than it currently is. But yeah, no, I mean, I just don't see a future where that's not like a huge.
That's big.
Essentially, yeah.
All right. And then I don't think I've ever asked this question. This will be my final question. This is so not a Sean question. All right. Because you said on more than one occasion, like there's a lot of self-hate. I want to ask you if you're comfortable sharing this, and you can roll your eyes if you want to, of course. What is one thing your fiance would say about you as to why you're so fucking great?
It's a very sweet question. I think she would say that I'm very compassionate and helpful. Actually, I've had this thought too. I don't know if this is true in your experience of like the suicidal people that I have heard almost seem like they carry the burden of the world to like a very extreme extent. Like these are people who like really feel the pain of others in like a very severe way. And to some extent that like I wonder if that's something that sort of pushes people over the edge or if it's just that like having been in that space that you can sort of empathize with others' pain a lot better than other people. But yeah, I think she would say I'm very, I don't know, I could probably give you a list. I despite the mean things I said, I think she would say I'm very compassionate and that I care a lot about other people.
Sweet. And I bet people, just my take, who will hear this and probably agree, or at least if nothing else, say, man, that was helpful. Which is, I think, the main reason we came on. What else we got? Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Genuinely do hope things get better and that you know what I mean? Just I do.
Oh, I do.
I know there's no guarantee, but I
mean,
do hope that for you.
It's what I want for myself too. So I do appreciate it. There's many others out there who are listening, and I mean, I feel like it's gotten me through some really dark nights. So yeah, really appreciate it.
It is my absolute pleasure, man. It's a dharma. So,
yep.
All right, man, hang in as best you can, and
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Alex, have a good day, brother. Be well. Thanks. Bye. As always, thanks so much for listening and all of your support, and special thanks to Alex in Illinois. Thank you, Alex. If you are a suicide attempt survivor and you'd like to talk, please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com or on Facebook or Twitter @suicidenoted. And again, I know I say this a lot, but if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review this podcast. It really helps people find it, and I think people need to find it. Thank you for that. That is all for episode number 85. Stay strong. Do the very best you can. I'll talk to you soon.